This last story in Mark chapter 4, we're going to see Jesus do something that amazes his disciples. He's going to display his kingly authority and power in a way they have not seen yet. If you've grown up in church, you've probably heard this story before, so it might not seem that surprising or amazing to you. But you've got to remember that this is not something anyone would expect or have seen. So far, the disciples have seen Jesus teach in remarkable, authoritative ways. They've seen him cure diseases. They've seen him forgive sin. They've seen him cast out demons. But today, Jesus is going to control the weather, essentially. So let's read it, and then we'll talk about it. So it's verse 35, Mark 4:35. It says, "That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, 'Let us go over to the other side.' And leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat. There were also others in the boats with them. A furious storm came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, 'Teacher, don't you care if we drown?' He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, 'Quiet, be still.' And the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, 'Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?' They were terrified and asked each other, 'Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him.'" So, again, this story is probably one you've seen in children's Bibles, or maybe heard just in Sunday school if you grew up going to church. And so, where Jesus calms the storm. But I think there are huge applications for us in our life. First of all, when the storm comes, Jesus is there. He's asleep on the boat. Which, by the way, if you can imagine spending all day with crowds, teaching them, healing them, and just doing this work all day long, the Bible makes it clear that Jesus is human and gets tired, and he's apparently exhausted. He's asleep. But he also just doesn't even seem worried about this storm. He's sleeping through the whole thing. And I think, for our lives, again, I think the storm, we can think of it for the way it applies to us, I guess, metaphorically, in that there are storms that we're going to face in this life. Maybe COVID-19 seems like a big storm in your life. Or I know for a lot of students, when they go to college, even though school might not stress you out now, I know so many people who were not stressed out in high school that they get to their first college finals season or their first big tests, and it just seems so overwhelming. They just feel like they don't have enough time. They just feel like they're not going to be able to do all that's required of them. Or maybe, again, I think the overwhelming, stressful things in our lives might take the form of a relationship that's just going really roughly, and you're not sure how it's going to turn out, and just so many things that can seem like a huge storm. And when the disciples encounter this storm, Jesus just does not even seem stressed out about it at all. And I think that should be one thing that comforts us and gives us perspective. That the things in our life that seem just impossible and overwhelming, and God, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. God, He cares about you, absolutely, but He's not concerned about them. He's not also up in heaven fretting about, I don't know how this is going to work out either. And I think in the same way, it's almost like the same relationship. At some point when you were really young, maybe when you were 2, you went and you got your vaccinations. You went to the doctor and he gave you these shots. And for a 2-year-old, that might be the most overwhelming, I don't know what's happening to me right now. This is very difficult and seems scary and seems painful. But for the parent and the doctor who are there, yes, they understand that it's scary and painful for you, but they're not concerned about what's happening because they know that it's good for you, and they know that the whole situation is under control. And they might certainly care for you and grieve that you are sad, but they're not fretting because of your circumstances in that moment because they know what's good for you. And similarly, when you were a little bit older and maybe you were in Little League and playing sports, you might lose a game, and that game loss might seem like the end of the world to you. But for your parents, they understand, like, man, there are going to be other things in your life that are bigger than this Little League game. And in fact, they might be able to see that, like, man, you losing a game, it's not fun for you. It's not fun for them to have you lose, but maybe they understand this is going to help you grow and be a good learning experience for you. They understand the big picture. And similarly in our life, God knows and sees the big picture. He's not putting you in circumstances that are outside of His control, and so we can trust Him, even in the biggest storm you might face. And that's where Jesus says when the disciples they think like teacher, they say, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" And Jesus responds to them and says, "Don't you understand who I am? Like, don't. Why do you have so little trust and so little faith in me?" And He just speaks a word, and the storm dies down. And that if we really understood who Jesus was, um, that He created you, He created the world, and so even natural phenomenon in the world are under His control because He made it all. Like He spoke it into existence. God fashioned it and formed it, and so it's under His control. So He's not overwhelmed by anything. He's not stressed out by anything. He is 100% sovereign, which means in control in any given moment. And so in verse 41, after Jesus does this, He says, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" The disciples are amazed and it says even terrified. They're just like, what just happened to us? And they ask each other, who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey Him. And that's the question in our lives. Like when you think of God, the most important thing about you is what you think of when you think of God and when you think of Christ. Like, do you think of Him as the sovereign Lord of the universe who's in control? Or do you think of Him just as like some distant idea that's barely even relevant to your life? That's the biggest question that's going to affect your life. And the Bible teaches, like, man, He is 100% in control. He's 100% caring about you. And so no matter what circumstances come your way, um, like, you can get through it. And the eventual thing that we see in the story of Mark and in the Bible is that God's even in control. You know, if the worst moment in your life is that moment when your earthly life comes to an end, God's even in control of that. That for Him, He's already conquered. Like that moment when your life on earth ends, actually He uses that to bring you into eternity with Him. It actually He's already conquered that too. He's already conquered what might seem like the darkest, biggest storm in your life. And so that should free us to not be afraid and to go through this life with confidence and trust in Him, even when the world around us seems to be falling apart and seems to be a storm. He is in control in every single moment.